Now we will be creating a business object. So can I create a business object? So for creating any business object, again, this is an artifact, right? And we are going to create a new artifact. So for that, I have to go on the left hand side palette. I see something called data, and next to data, I have the plus sign. And if I click on the plus sign, I get the first option called business object. So what does business object says? You see, business object represent the data that is used in an application. You can create complex business objects with multiple parameters of different variable types to store the data, for example, that a user would enter in a form. Okay, exactly what we discussed. Now, what is a complex business object? We will understand that. Okay, so first, let me provide a name to this business object. Now, you see the name which I have provided. First of all, yes, it's a big name. I am using two different words or two different strings in this while naming this business object, and I did not put any space in between. We should not put any space in between while naming a business object. Okay, there should not be any space. And the name, ideally, as per the best principles, whatever the best practice we follow, the name should always start with an uppercase letter. Okay. And since I am using two different strings, one is employee and the other is information, I am also maintaining camel case, right? So this new word which I've added later, information, I'm starting again this word with an uppercase letter. So we can consider this as a camel case, and we should always follow this kind of naming conventions. Okay, this is how we should name a business object. There are many people who would name a business object starting with a case letter, but that is not correct. Okay, we should always follow the best practices. Now I click on finish, and now this business object gets created. And if you see on the right hand side, there is something called behavior, right? And here in the definition type, we have complex type of business object and simple type of business object. Okay, what is a complex type business object? Yesterday, while we were discussing, right? So these are the different parameters that we have that we were thinking to add in a business object. Now, if you see this closely, employee ID is string, right? Employee name is also string. Type of leave, yes, it is not string. What is exactly what we have to use, what data type we have to use, we'll discuss about this later. But yes, it is definitely not of type string. Leave duration, it can be an integer, right? Again, if I go to start date and end date, so this should be of date type, right? Mobile number can be an integer. What else we have? And the other things that we have, email ID, manager name, manager action, manager comments, this can be again string. So you see, this business object, it consists of multiple parameters of different data types, right? So whenever you create a business object which has parameters of multiple data type, we consider that business object as a complex business object. Okay. By default, whenever you are going to use a business object in your process, okay, even in your project, always a business object needs to be a complex one only. Okay, that's the reason we create a business object, so that we can add multiple parameters of different data types over here. And what is the other type of business object? The other type is simple business object. And what is simple business object? It is just the opposite. So I can add as many parameters I can in a business object, but all the parameters needs to be of the same data type. If I'm adding a string parameter, then I have to take this into consideration that whatever parameters I add going ahead in this business object, everything needs to be a string. Okay. If I'm adding an integer, then I have to maintain like this, that all the other parameters which I'm going to add, that also needs to be an integer. Okay. In a real case scenario, in a real time scenario, we don't use a simple business object. We always go for a complex business object. Okay. What is shared object? We will discuss this later. Okay. So once we complete the human service and everything, once we know how a process runs, then after that we'll discuss about what is a shared object. Okay, this needs we need to understand how a process gets triggered first. Okay, and how the different types of activities they get triggered, that we will see, and then we'll come back to the shared object. So we have a session on shared objects separately, so we'll discuss on this later. And here you see the definition. Complex type is also there and simple type is also there. Whenever I created this business object, by default complex type was selected, right? So now we come below and we see there is something called parameters. Okay, and here you see next to parameters you have this plus sign. So you can use this plus sign to add as many parameters you can in this business object. Okay, I can have n number of parameters in a business object. There is no limit of adding, like we have like 40 parameters we can add, or like 15 parameters we can add. There is nothing like that. We can add n number of parameters inside a business object. So we'll add the parameters one by one. I click on the plus sign, and on the right hand side, I can see there is something called parameter properties. So whatever parameter we are adding, so if I have to change the property of any of them, then in that case, I can change the property of these parameters. Okay. So first parameter which we will be adding is employee ID. I'm giving a name as EMP ID, which is of type string. Okay, so if you have to change this data type from string to integer or any other, you see here next to it you have a select button, and here you see all the different types of data types are available. Even apart from this, if you want some other data types, then you see right at the end there is something called show all business objects. Okay, so instead of a data type, if I want to use some business object over here, that also I can do. So you just have to enable this option, and whatever business objects are available, whatever data types are available, they are now being displayed over here, and I can use any one according to my requirement. Okay, so for this employee ID, we will keep this as string and we will move forward. So we'll add employee name, which should also be a string. So there is no point in changing the data type. Okay, what else we have? We have type of leaf. Now, type of leaf which we are going to implement, right, in the employee task. So usually, I mean, if you go back to the older versions of IBM BPM, if we have to implement this kind of type of leaf through a drop down, we used to implement it as a list of string. I believe you understand what is a list and why we need a list, because it's a drop down and it will consist of more than one value, right? And whenever I have to store more than one value in a parameter, I have to declare that parameter as a list. Now a list can be anything. It can be a list of string, it can be a list of integer, right? But for our scenario, it should be a list of string. I mean, if I go back to the older versions like 8.5.5, 8.5, that time we used to use some other toolkit like responsive coaches. Nowadays we are using Spark UI toolkit, right? We are using BPM UI toolkit or Spark UI toolkit. Now the drop down coach view that we have inside a Spark UI toolkit, that doesn't support list of string. Okay. So previously it used to support the toolkit that we used to use responsive coaches. Over there also we had a drop down coach view that used to support a list of string, but this supports list of name value pair. All right. What is this name value pair? Name value pair is business object that is being provided to us by IBM BPM. Okay. So if I just map name value pair, so how can I map it? Next to variable type, I can see string is selected. If I have to change this to a name value pair, I have to click on select, search at the top. You see at the top there is a search bar. So I just typed name. and I can see name value pair has come. Next to it, you see there is something called system data. Whatever data type or business object, whenever you see something called system data next to it, that means it's something provided to us by IBM BPM. Okay, this is not a business object that has been created by a developer. It is something which has been provided by IBM BPM. Now, if I map this name value pair, if you see on the left hand side, this business object has two parameters. One is name and the other is value. Okay. Now, why this name value pair business object was introduced? The reason being, this name value pair is there since the time, since the version 7.0, 7.5, this name value pair business object is there in IBM BPM. Now, usually, whenever we perform any database operation, okay, say we want to say there is a table, and in that employee table, maybe we have say employee ID and employee name column. Okay, and into each row we have the different employees, the employee information which has the employee ID and the employee name. Now, whenever we fetch any data from the database, name value pair was being used a lot. Reason being, you see, there is something called name and value. So name can store the employee ID and value can store the employee name for that employee ID. So it is very easy. If you have a business object like this, then it becomes very easy to map any data coming from the database into this business object. That is the reason why this name value pair was introduced. So that any kind of database operation that we are performing, wherever we are doing a fetch operation, we can store the information into this business object. Okay, we'll discuss into this more. Okay, about this name value pair and things. We have our database sessions. So although I'm going to show you using a business object, but how we can use a name value pair, that also we are going to discuss. Okay, for the time being, whatever we are implementing now for this type of leave, name and value, whatever I'm going to use to populate that list, I can store in the name and the value both the same kind of information. Say for example, type of leave would consist of different type of leaves, like we have privilege leave, we have casual leave, we have sick leave, we have maternity leave. All these different types of leaves that we can store them in this name and value parameter inside this name value business object, name value pair business object, right? How to store it, how to populate, we will see today itself. Now this type of leaf, which I have mapped with this name value pair business object, I also need to make it as a list, right? Because this variable is going to hold more than one value. That's the reason I have to make it as a list. So how can I make it as a list? You see in the parameter property, just next to name, you have something called list. And next to list, you have this checkbox. If you enable this checkbox, automatically this parameter becomes a list. Okay, so now I can use this parameter as a list in my process. What else we have? We have selected leave. Okay, then what else we can have? We can have start date.
Start date, end date.
Yeah, so start date should not be of type string. So I have to change the variable
Mhm.
type to date. There is something called date which is available in IBM BPM. You see this one. So we need to map this over here. Similarly, in okay, and leave duration we will not take. We will take mobile number is also actually not required. Manager name is not required over here. But yes, we have to create this parameter. That is correct. So these things we are going to create manager name. Then we have manager. What else? Manager comments we have or manager remarks. Okay, we also have something called reason of leave. Okay, which we Okay, so reason of leave. What else we have? We have manager action. Okay. So if I
Can
need to, yes,
can we implement start date and end date as a list? Because the duration will be dependent on start date and end date, right?
started and ended as a
A list.
no, that we cannot do. So yes, leave duration can still be calculated. Okay, so we can definitely add a leave duration. That is fine. So I will keep this as leave duration, and this needs to be. It can be a string, or better, we can use it as an integer. So we need to convert. So whenever the difference we get in date, so we need to convert that into an integer and store it in the leave duration parameter. Okay. But yes, we cannot keep them as list because we are going to implement date time picker, right? What is date time picker? Date time picker is a calendar, right? You see in many web pages wherever you fill up the application form. Even I believe if you go into your leave application portal for your organization, there also I believe will be some calendar will be there where you select the start date and the end date. So similar kind of implementation we will do it here, and that is the reason we cannot change the data type of the start date and end date because date time picker in IBM BPM it supports only date type of variable. Okay, so any questions or queries, guys, on this business object creation?
Rahul, in the parameters,
Hmm.
any like we have odd kept in a separate order, right? Does it
Hmm.
affect while in that code?
No, no, it will not. It can be of any order.
Because the leave duration is after the start and end date, so
Hmm.
you can rearrange it without changing the entire parameter list.
Yes, you can definitely rearrange. You see, there is an arrow, right?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I can move this up if I want. But yes, I mean, yes, definitely you can move any parameter up or down, but order doesn't matter. Okay. So all the parameters needs to be a part of your business object. It can be at any order. So if you want to place them in order, so definitely we can use these arrows to move this up, and even something which is at that we can also move that down. Any other queries, guys, on business object?
Rahul, this is Shashank.
Yes, hi Rishant.
Rahul, we can give the manager action as a boolean, right? Whether to approve a leave or
Yes,
not.
we can do that. We can do that as well, but just think of a bigger picture. Now, yes, we will capture the value in the manager task as a boolean. That is correct. Whenever we click on approve, if approve is true, if that button value is true, then in that case, what we will do in this manager action, we will populate approved. If reject is true, then in that case, we are going to map or we are going to assign the value of reject to this manager action. Okay.
Okay.
So the reason why I'm not going to use a boolean because going ahead, if I have to send an email, right, to the employee or to the manager regarding this, or if I want to store this in some database, then rather than boolean, I believe string would be much more helpful for me. Straight away, I can see the database and I can understand that for this transaction, was it simply approved or rejected? So in manager action column, I can easily see that if it is approved, it will show me approved. If it is rejected, then it will show me reject.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Any other queries? We are good. Okay. All right. So now we have created this business object. Now we need to implement it in the process, and even going forward in the services also we have to implement this, right? So how we can implement this in the process? Very simple. Yesterday I said, so we need to go to our process. We have something called variables. And over here, guys, we will be creating a private variable. I believe we all are aware, like why are we creating a private variable? Why I'm not going to create an input or output variable? I believe these concepts are clear. So I'm going to create a private variable here. I give a name as employee information, and you see the variable type, it is string. I will not be using string. I already have created a business object. So I click on select and I will search for the business object which we had created just now. So this is the one, employee information. I'm just going to click on that. Okay. And I will save it. How to change this? Either you can use Control S from your keyboard, or you see right at the top there is there's a check, a tick mark is there, and whenever you hover your mouse, you will see it says finish editing. Okay, you can click on that and you can save the changes whatever you have done on any artifact. Okay, be it a process, be it a service, be it a business object, you can save in the same way. Now I have added this variable and I have binded this with this business object. And now you see if I expand this, all the parameters are available. And the good thing about this, about using a business object is, like I said yesterday, say maybe after a month or after even 2 months, if the customer or the client comes to us and tells that we need to add few more parameters in the business object, just going to the business object, if we go and add those parameters, automatically it will get updated in whichever artifacts wherever I'm using this business object. Okay, so I don't have to go and manually add parameters into every artifact. So only by changing the business object, automatically it will get updated everywhere. Okay, so we are good with business object, I believe. Now we will come to the next topic, which is important.